So it's very exciting because the Women's Prize for Fiction 2026 have announced their shortlist. There are 6 books on the shortlist, and I'm going to read through each book in the month of May 2026. So the first book that I read that was nominated for the Women's Prize for Fiction 2026 and it was shortlisted is Flashlight by Susan Choi. And I really loved this book. But first, what is this book about? This book starts off with a young girl and her father walking on a beach in Japan. Then something happens and the man has disappeared. The girl is lying on the beach having almost drowned. The girl cannot remember what happened, and so the authorities decide that the man has just disappeared. He probably got swept away into the sea, but his body is never found. This moment that occurs on the beach is what the whole book is about. And throughout the book, we follow a series of characters. We follow Louisa, who is the young girl who was on the beach and whose father went missing. We follow Serk, who is Louisa's father, who went missing. We follow Anne, who is the wife to Serk and the mother to Louisa. And we follow Tobias, who is Anne's son that she had to give away when she was 19 because she couldn't look after him. And after the first chapter, which looks at the moment in which Serk went missing on that beach, we then follow Serk and Anne and Louisa in the lead up to that moment occurring, and then it also goes beyond that to after that moment occurring. And I think the central mystery of what happened to Serk really propels you forward and keeps you reading. And in the end, I was very surprised at the place that the novel went to. I learned a lot about things that happen in the world that I didn't know anything about. And I think a novel that is highlighting an issue that has very much gone under the radar is a very important one at spreading awareness about that issue. Firstly, I want to talk about the amazing writing in this book. I think I'm coming to find that my favourite part about reading is just wonderful sentences that make you see life from a different perspective. I get so excited when I read a good sentence, more so than if I'm reading a very dramatic scene, for example. Susan Choi's writing reminded me of Elif Shafak's writing, something like "There are rivers in the sky." Now, there are rivers in the sky, even though it is based on reality, feels a little bit more ethereal than something like Flashlight. Flashlight is very much grounded in reality, but I think the writing style of both authors is fairly similar. And I think why the writing worked so well in this is that Susan Choi has such a good understanding of people, and she's able to write about people just so well. I'll give an example. When describing Louisa, she writes, "Louisa is a high-strung, fastidious child, always quick to believe she has failed, but she is equally a powerful, confident child when conditions are right." Also, when describing Louisa's father, she writes, "Louisa's father loved complaining, but he hated other people complaining, as if he thought they were saying a thing was his fault." It just gives you such a good understanding of that character through that one line. I also just loved how she allowed you to see things from a different perspective through the vocabulary in which she used. Serk, Louisa's father, could speak Japanese as a child, but he became less able to as he grew. And she writes that his Japanese was arrested at the level of a child. And the idea that the language is arrested, I just really enjoyed that. There are also lines in here which make you consider your own opinions and thoughts on things. For example, she writes, "He seemed willing to embrace anything. Was this because he was empty, a ravenous void, or because he was full?" And it's such a good question. Is apathy there because you're actually happy with your life and you don't want to contend with difficult feelings? Or is apathy there because you're actually not happy with your life and you just don't really care anymore? Also, I learned so many new words through reading this book. I decided to write down all the new words that I was learning and make the definitions. And I really enjoy it when a book teaches me words that I didn't know before, because it just makes me feel smarter. For example, punctiliousness, beatific, serfdom, jettison, pugilistic. And it felt like the writer had really thought about every word she used. She'd really taken time with every sentence. And I think on a sentence by sentence level, this book is a masterclass in how to write. One of the main themes of this book is how the past affects us in the future. So I spoke about how this novel centres around a moment where Serk goes missing on a beach in Japan, and part of the novel is about before that event and part of the novel is about after that event. And we see how that moment affects Louisa as she grows older. We see how that moment affects Anne as she grows older too, who is Serk's wife. And Louisa, the child on the beach whose father goes missing, is really the main character of the story. So we see her from childhood way up into middle age. And you see how a lot of things in her childhood affect her in the future. For example, her parents don't have a great relationship. They kind of hate each other, to be honest, which is another thing I found interesting, because I think Serk disappearing on the beach, that is perhaps more emotionally impactful if Anne, his wife, loved him more. So it was an interesting choice by the writer to make Anne and Serk not really like each other, to be honest. You can kind of understand why they don't like each other, because Serk never talks about his past and his family to Anne, and Anne never really talks about her past and her family to Serk. So I mentioned that Anne has another son with another man who she had when she was 19 and had to give away. In the book, she tells Louisa that this isn't a secret, and she has told Serk about this son that she has, but I don't think she did. I think she lied to Louisa about that, and that is up for discussion as to whether she did lie or not. I love that thing in books where you don't actually know if something is true or not, and you as the reader can decide if you think the character is being truthful. And maybe I did miss somewhere where it is evident that Serk did know about Tobias, but I think he didn't. And so you can see that the past that Anne and Serk had has affected their relationship, and is maybe why their relationship isn't really working that well. And you can see that Louisa, who sees that her parents have quite a fraught relationship, then maybe internalises that, and it could be the reason that she has difficulty with relationships when she's older. A criticism I've heard is that there's a part in the book where Louisa is at university and then she goes travelling in Europe for a bit, mainly in London and in Paris, and people have said that bit dragged, but I actually really enjoyed those moments because we see how her life at university and while travelling is affected by things she's experienced in the past. There's a part where she meets someone in a hostel, and the person in the hostel says how children who had to tell other children that the Father Christmas wasn't real, were like ruining the fun, you know? And Louisa realises that she was a child like that. And then you can ask yourself, why was she a child like that? Was it because of the things she'd experienced, or was it just the way that she was? And I am endlessly curious about the nature versus nurture argument, because I think I have a lot of anxiety, and I don't think that that has been caused by things that I've experienced necessarily. I do think I was maybe born that way, because I remember being anxious at a very young age. And this book is looking at that. Is Louisa who she is because that's who she is, or is it because of the things she's experienced? This book is also looking a lot at the theme of memory, which is also very interesting, because I'm sure there are a lot of things that I remember differently to how they actually occurred. And I also think there are many moments in my life, especially things that I experienced as a child, that I no longer remember. And the significance of the title, Flashlight, is related to the theme of memory. And so a flashlight, when you shine it in the dark, only highlights a small part of an area, not the whole area. A lot of it is still cloaked in darkness. And that is the same kind of thing with memory. We're only ever really remembering bits. We're never seeing the whole picture. Now I want to talk about the central moment of the story, which is Serk's disappearance, in a bit more detail, so there will be spoilers in this section, but I'll say when the spoilers end. So I had no idea that North Korea kidnapped people from other countries and took them back to North Korea, and I started researching more about this, and it seems that a lot of the cases have gone undocumented because they've been written off as like suicides or just runaways, and that's just terribly sad. I grew very connected to Serk because we see him from a young child growing up in Japan. We see his family go to North Korea thinking it's a bright future for them due to the propaganda that has been fed to them. We see him go to America and meet Anne and have Louisa, and then to see his life completely change and him go to a labour camp, which is really heartbreaking. The scene where Serk is trying to escape the labour camp and where he goes across the frozen river to China are just some of the most intense scenes that I've read. I think what is so heartbreaking at the end is that Anne is dead, so he never gets to see his wife again. Like, even though their relationship was quite fraught, I think there was still love under the surface. And then he sees Louisa, but he can't really remember her. The ending is not this great reunion, it's actually just very sad because you realise that so much of his life has been taken through him being kidnapped. So yeah, Flashlight by Susan Choi, a really fantastic book. I say this is 4.5 out of 5 stars. Thank you very much for watching. Have you read the book? What do you think about it? I'd love to know. And I'll see you in another video soon. Bye bye.